Hello everybody, Pinball!
Pinball! Pinball! Pinball!
Welcome to Pinball! The Pinball! It's a pinball today. It's a podcast about pinballs. Pinball,
Yes.
pinball.
So yeah, don't worry folks, we haven't gone back to Windows XP for this one.
Actually, this is much older than Windows XP. What are you talking about,
It
Damar?
was basically the last system to basically have this game to come with
Right.
Microsoft Windows.
Before I forget, because that tends to happen quite often, I should introduce myself. I am Madhog die Pinball, and this guy is Pinball Arkvaron, and tonight we pinball with the gods.
Yes, we pinball.
Not really with the gods. I don't know why I said that, but it sounded like it had gravitas. And when you do a podcast, I mean a pinball, a pimcast, you want some gravitas in your life. Because pinball is the greatest sport ever known to man. And I say that because I used to play pinball in my younger years.
I don't know why, I thought you were about to say you play pinball in your sleep. Okay,
Canonically, I said that. I play pinball in my sleep. I am that darn good at pinball. Hence why the VAR is playing instead of me. That makes sense, right?
Yes.
You weren't very impressive with Tetris. Let us see if this particular classic pinball machine, virtual machine I should say, it should have been a real machine if you ask me. Let's see if you are any better at it.
Well, it's all about luck and basically physics essentially, so...
Blasphemy! Pinball is all about skill and perseverance and timing and hope that the ball doesn't fall on the side that which cannot be reached by
exactly.
your little levers.
Yeah, or in that sweet spot in the middle where neither of your flippers could ever hope to hit it.
You know what? Pinball machines are a hoax. They steal your money. It's a pyramidal scheme, I tell you, and I hate them now.
By the way, speaking of pinball, I used to play a bit of pinball in arcades and some pubs back in the day when I was young.
That happened to me as well. Wait, what am I saying? I've already established that. Let me continue on that line of thought. I played famously, I played the Judge Dredd arcade machine back in the day, in my lost summer days, if you will. And unlike some other popular machines from the 90s, such as the Frankenstein one, this was not inspired by the film. This was inspired by the original comic, hence why it looked aesthetically pleasing.
I wish I could remember the pinballs I played, because as far as I know, I have no idea what pinball machines I played. You know, that...
So yes, the other kids were playing Street Fighter 2. Me, I was playing the Judge Dredd pinball machine. A bit of background about this game. There was a time in the mid to late 90s in which this game was inside every personal computer imaginable. Chances are most of you might have played it at some point.
Yeah, I definitely played it as well, along with some of the other games to give it a go, like Solitaire and Minesweeper.
That is incredibly sad, I should add, but not all freeware games that come with your personal computer's Windows 3.1 can be as exciting as Space Cadet 3D Pinball.
Exactly.
Pinball!
This is definitely
Indeed.
one of the more exciting and better games to basically sink your time into on your breaks.
Granted, a real pinball machine would be better, but nobody manufactures those anymore. Even if they did, they would be a very expensive collector's item for the wealthy, and no one else.
Yeah.
So virtual pinball it is then. I am very thankful that people made it available for download online.
Yeah, I'm thankful for that too, because honestly, the download you found, Madhog, the entire site
It was an Italian site, I know. It's the first website that I found.
Yeah, I had to find an English one because I don't understand Italian. That means I got lost and had no idea what anything was asking of me. So
You mean to tell me you did not find the big green download button in that page?
oh, I did find it once I realized the site was asking me to not use ad blocker on it. But then another message popped up asking me something else, and because I couldn't understand what it was asking of me, I basically decided, well, I'm gonna look for an English one so that I could actually get a hold of this game.
Retrospect, that's probably a wise move, considering there were several download buttons on that page, and not all of them would redirect you to the game. But to some other program that the page was advertising, I believe.
Yeah. But
anyway, pinball.
But I did end up finding something very interesting out while I was actually, going through looking for this game. I basically found an article that basically directed me to a download for this game, which was basically made for preserving this game.
Swell.
As an executable file, you could just download, install, and it's boom, it's on your computer. You don't need to worry about anything else. And
you don't need to install ScumVM to play this pinball.
Yeah, you don't need any emulators. You don't need any
Hullabaloos and thingamajigs.
Yeah, like setting it to Windows XP mode or whatever.
You are giving me flashbacks to how I used to play my PC port of Resident Evil 2 with my Windows XP computer.
Oh gosh.
It was a nightmare, and I do not wish to relive that experience. That was also back in the day in which I was able to play with tank controls. I cannot do that anymore.
I don't think I could, even if I wanted to, honestly. But anyway, back to
Surprisingly, it was much easier on the keyboard.
So yeah, back to the trivia about this.
Oh, wait, you haven't said your trivia yet?
No, I've not said anything about the trivia yet. So apparently when this game was made and was put onto every machine in the system on Microsoft's Windows for many, many years until Windows XP, the people who made this game were not Microsoft. So that means at some point Microsoft couldn't put this game onto any of the newer systems. And they basically try to make their own and code their own, only to find that they have no idea how the original developers for this game made this game, especially for the hit detection of all the doodads and buttons and the flippers.
Oh, jolly. This would have been yet another case of a classic IP lost in the limbo between copyright ownership and distribution.
Pretty much.
Luckily, there are abandonwares.
Yep, and luckily we have people who are preserving video games, unlike certain other companies.
Hey, Devar, this is a family-friendly podcast. We do not take sides on this event. We want to celebrate the gaming industry for its people, and we do not approve of abuse. That's why we will not address or talk at all about abuse in the industry. The Game Awards, everybody! The gaming industry, just like any industry, it's a capitalistic hellscape. Unionize. Free exclamation marks.
All the unionization, in my opinion.
Yes, and by the way, I just read the Kellogg's worker strike bore fruit, and they basically won.
Good.
So there is a good news in that. Going back to pinball, I was going to segue to a pinball adjacent topic here.
Yeah.
A very short one. I was going to talk to you about the greatest pinball film ever made. It's titled Willy's Wonderland, and you might have heard of it.
No, I have not heard of it actually at all.
Oh, well, do I have a short but enthralling tale to tell you then? The story goes that some producers wanted to make the Five Nights at Freddy's film, groan loudly with me, except the Big Scott was not really happy with the script for the film, so he took his precious little IP and went home. The producers, out of spite, still made the film. They changed all the names, they hired Nicolas Cage to play the protagonist, and the entire film is about Nicolas Cage as silent video game protagonist destroying and mutilating zany killer animatronics in the most one-sided beatdown in cinematic history. And it is glorious. From a strictly technical standpoint, this film is atrocious. It is poorly directed, frantically edited. Generally speaking, the cast is very unimpressive. You can't even fully appreciate the scenes of gratuitous animatronic violence because of the frazzled editing. But Nicolas Cage just being in it, even without ever saying a single spoken line of dialogue in the entire picture, he elevates it. Just seeing Nicolas Cage slowly turning his head towards the front of the evil restaurant and looking at it with intensity, that just makes the film for me. It's trash, but it's my kind of enjoyable trash. And I said to you before that this is the greatest pinball film ever made, right?
Yes.
Nicolas Cage is hired to be the unwitting sacrificial lamb for the animatronics in the not FNAF diner, but officially his job is to be the janitor and clean up the place. He takes frequent breaks, and during those breaks, he plays with a pinball machine. And let me remind you, this is Nicolas Cage playing with a pinball machine. He makes sweet, sweet love to that pinball machine, let me tell you. Okay, he doesn't literally put his Willy inside that Wonderland, mind you. They are shot in such a way that it implies is having sex with a pinball machine, and he put on his coitus face while doing so. It's so good.
Come on, get the middle, get the middle. Oh, damn it. Why couldn't you go into the middle?
Right. So, pinball woos, I assume.
Yes, pinball woes. I basically was hoping it would go in the middle, instead it went into the left.
More like pinball wows! Or pinball wars! That too. By the way, I should apologize to our dear and patient audience for the lack of audio from the game.
Oh yes, I forgot about that part. So yeah, we had to mute it because even at the lowest possible volume, apparently the game wants to be super obnoxiously loud.
Even though you don't hear the audio from it, you will hear it anyway in your mind, in your memory.
In your heart.
Nostalgia is a powerful drug.
It certainly
Speaking of such, today I have been playing all day that Digimon game, you know, Cyber Sleuth.
Oh.
Well, how do I put this in a way that doesn't make me sound like a clod? I freaking love it in a way that I was not expecting myself to do so. My relationship with Digimon has been pretty straightforward, pretty distant for the most part over the years. Of course, I have an inherent nostalgia for the original Digimon Adventure anime.
No, it's the first season.
The famous first season, which was dirt cheap had no budget whatsoever, and yet I would watch all of it whenever I could. And whenever I think about the Italian version of the theme song, which I have memorized, by the way, to my surprise, I have memorized, I still remember it. I could sing it to you if you want. You wouldn't understand any word in it because it's the Italian version, but I know it and I love it. It brings up a deeply animalistic part of my reptilian brain, and I start acting like some sort of airy ape that's too excited for its own good. That is all to say that it's been a while, and yet, when I started playing this game, the second certain familiar faces showed up on my Nintendo Switch screen, I went ballistic. As ballistic as you would expect a nerd to go for a franchise of which they have nostalgia.
I can understand that completely.
Oh my gosh, that's Agumon! Palmon! Gabumon! Gabumon is alright. But, oh! It's Gatomon! Renamon! Leomon! I won't let you die this time! It is a game akin to Pokemon in that you receive a starter and you collect Digimon as you go on, but it happens in the context of a interesting story with actual stakes in which you get to be, as the title suggests, a cyber sleuth, a digital detective, if you will. You go back and forth between the real world and the digital one. Your body, due to an accident, becomes some sort of data conglomeration, and you collect Digimon and you fight monsters and you solve cases. And I already have champion level monsters after a few hours.
Of course.
And I am way ahead of the game itself, so that's telling you something about my dedication. It helps that I have just finished playing Shin Megami Tensei 5, which is exactly like this game, except much harder and much more complex, and you really have to engage with its mechanics on a deeper level. You don't need to do that with Digimon Cyber Sleuth, but I did it anyway, and here we are. Yes, here we are. I've only played a few hours in it, although they might be a lot more hours, come to think of it. I don't know how many hours I put on this game already. But I am loving it. This is a Digimon podcast from here on out. This is just for me to gush about my favorite Digimon. Oh, it's Gilmon! And so on.
I have to admit that I've not seen or watched Digimon ever since the second season, where basically...
The second season was not good at all.
No,
in fairness.
The second season, just for anyone who doesn't know...
It was a mess.
The first season would basically be the one with the first team with Ty and Matt and...
Never mind me.
Mimi, who basically in English publications was seen as, oh, look at this character. She looks like Aerith from Final Fantasy VII.
You know, now that you have pointed it out, I cannot unsee it. But she did have a cowboy hat.
Yes.
And she did have Palmon! Palmon! I love you, Palmon! Palmon was my starter Digimon in the video game.
and the second season would be considered the one where the first Digi-Destined would basically end up growing older, and two of them would come back for, to be the next set of
more, essentially.
Digi-Destined.
Yes. They added a few more mechanics that didn't need to be there, and they made the whole ethos of Digimon a lot more complicated than it realistically needed to be. You probably don't know this, but Digimon started off as a successor to the Tamagotchi.
Makes
The
sense.
mainline video game series was titled Digimon World, and it's essentially a pet growing simulator with a RPG battle system tacked onto it, and it's one of the most infuriating pieces of gaming history ever concocted. No wonder it didn't catch on the West.
Oh,
Right. Of course, when you talk about Digimon, the anime Digimon, you would be remiss not to mention Digimon Tamers, the infamous one. Arguably the best Digimon series, but also the series that basically had no business being as dark as it was, which is something that might happen when you hire the serial experiment Lane guy to write the story for it. Also, the same guy turned out to be an absolute scumbag. This year, he produced some sort of new script for a possible sequel for Digimon Tamers, and it's about fighting back against cancel culture. And it's just as bad as you might think.
Oh gosh.
So that's really disappointing to learn, especially since Digimon Tamers was quite good. Quite not a children's show, but quite good indeed. It gave us Renamon, for crying out loud!
I mean, I did watch the second season, but I think I remember only watching one episode of one particular Digimon series, but I forgot its name. But I remember they brought in the whole Digimon Modify mechanic. I really didn't stick around for more than one episode of that, honestly.
Digimon had a smoothly established system for evolving your Digimon that was presented in the anime, but then they decided to overcomplicate the process with whatever idiotic gadgetry they added in the second season. Nobody cared about season 2. Basically, reliving my Digimon memories through this video game that I'm playing right now was akin to being 12 again. Like I said, it surprised me how much I marked out for Palmon when I saw her the first time. And then, all of a sudden, within 2 hours of this game, I get Renamon through Digi-Evolution, and I lose my mind. It feels so good to sometimes let go of your appearance of well-adjusted adultness and let it all out like a screaming child.
Yeah.
I understand the Pokemon fans a little bit better now.
I mean, I get.
By the way, since we are talking about Pokemon, Digimon does a Pokemon better than Pokemon. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm going to be that guy.
Oh,
Digimon
God.
is so much better than Pokemon. A better story, a better designed characters, and the digital world is so much cooler than the Kanto region. Ooh, look at me. I'm a monster collector hipster now. Hey, do you remember Monster Rancher?
Yes.
Let me tell you about Monster Rancher. Oh, have you heard about Metabots? Well, here's a Metabot NFT. Buy it.
Yeah, by the way, screw NFTs.
Yes, they are accelerating the environmental apocalypse, and they are a pyramidal scheme. Just
Yes.
like all of capitalism, so screw them.
Yes, it's useless to our society, so piss off. Anyway.
Right.
So anyway,
Should we change topics?
I was actually gonna say, you know, freaking what? I didn't think about it from, until now, sort of thing. Even though I keep on thinking, many years, like, oh, look how similar Pokemon and Digimon are, except this and this are different, sort of thing. And now I'm like thinking, you know what? Why can't we ever have a crossover with these two?
It wouldn't make any freaking sense. They are such fundamentally different universes. And also, the whole ethos about Digimon is that there is a certain self-awareness. about its fictional video game nature, considering that those monsters are literally digital monsters that come out of your computer. Pokemon, on the other hand, would not want children to be made aware that they are fictional creatures that come out of your gaming console.
Yeah, I bet they would.
And it's really not that interesting when you think about it. Okay, so they are both collectible monsters, but they have very little in common. A much more interesting crossover, giving certain similarities between the settings, would be between Digimon and the Matrix. Do you want to see your Digimon in the Matrix? I would.
Oh god, it kind of reminds me that there was a recent craze about a tech demo of the Matrix with Unreal Engine physics, and everyone was going crazy for that.
Speaking of going crazy, do you remember Path of Neo on the PlayStation 2?
Oh god, I remember seeing it everywhere.
I played the absolute gazoos out of that game.
I've never played it, honestly, but I do remember seeing it was advertised everywhere. There was a lot on the shelves for a week or two, and then suddenly gone.
Yes, I grabbed it when I could, and in fairness, it is one of the better film-licensed video games out there. What's most interesting about it is that it had a completely different climax compared to the last film in the trilogy, which, by the way, the video game covers the entire trilogy.
Yeah.
It was a very different ending in which the Wachowski sisters, back in the day, were yet to transition. They come onto you on the screen with their pixelated avatars and tell you, we're going to change the ending to make it more exciting.
Yeah,
for
and,
the
more,
video game.
And more video gamey, because...
So the final boss, because of that, the final boss of Path of Neo was all the Agent Smiths coming together into a giant Agent Smith Voltron. Which is a lot more video gamey, I will give them that. Anyway, so The Matrix 4 is coming out. I don't know how to feel about it. I guess we'll see.
We'll see, but I will say one thing. I would be very surprised if Warner Brothers' latest crossover video game that they're doing, Multiverse, which is a free-to-play fighting game.
Multiverses.
Yeah, Multiverses. And I'd be surprised if The Matrix doesn't get in.
It's going to be an expensive DLC character.
Yes, I imagine so as well. But like I said, the game is going to be free to play, which has me very, very concerned because it's Warner Brothers and we know what they're like with microtransactions. Am I right, Lord of the Rings Shadow of War?
This actually reminds me how they managed to patent a video game design choice. Hence why nobody can make a game like Shadow of Mordor ever again.
Yeah, everyone was really pissed off about that. I heard about it. Even I was pissed because that's like saying, you know, ooh, I own the rights to fighting game mechanics in general, so now only one company could make fighting games.
Somebody at some point patented the concept of playing mini-games during loading screens.
Namco. They were the ones who did that.
Namco did that. So nobody else could do it. It's a slippery slope, really. If you manage to patent a game mechanic that gives you unprecedented control to a template, which limits the kind of games and the variety of games that can be made in general. It limits art. Imagine if somebody in the Renaissance decided, I'm going to copyright oil painting.
Oh,
imagine that! I'm going to copyright the portrayal of naked women. That's basically 90% of all paintings! Are you crazy? But yes, if Warner Bros., Namco, or indeed Activision Blizzard existed in the Renaissance, They would have copywritten all of that.
They probably would, yeah.
And they would have abused the painters up until they were driven to suicide or something.
But yeah, actually, but on the topic of Warner Brothers doing crossovers, there seems to be a lot of crossover madness going on with Warner Brothers.
Don't remind me of Space Jam, the film that made me lose the will to live for approximately 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say that one, but also this new multiverses they're going to be doing, but also this, I wouldn't call it a pilot or anything. It's more of a trailer to basically say as a proof of concept, but it's basically a little animation by a name of Pibby.
Yes, I've seen that. It was released on the 31st of October this year by Adult Swim, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was really interesting, and it could work as a miniseries, nothing longer than 6 episodes, if you ask me. But it's definitely something that Adult Swim, circa the year 2005, would have indubitably made. After all, it is the age of R.V. Birdman, C-Lab, 2021.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 2021 this year, so C-Lab is happening right now.
It totally is.
Underneath the C-Lab, underneath the water. That one.
Yes, I remember that one. I actually watched that one with my fiance.
I've watched every episode until Murphy sadly was removed from the series because the actor died.
Oh.
It was definitely a product of its time. I would call it a prototype for what Archer would end up doing.
For those not in the know of what I'm talking about with Pibby,
Pibby!
Pibby is a short animated trailer,
which could feasibly count as a pilot.
And I would actually say to everybody else, if you've not watched it yet, then go see it. It's actually pretty cool. It's interesting, visually dark and creepy at some points.
Honestly, it seems like this came out of the mind of somebody who was so fed up with all the crossovers, the shared universe, the constant, unmitigated, aggressive advertising that corporations do to us in selling the nostalgia factor of all the IPs that they own. It's something that comes out directly to criticize a Space Jam, if you will. Basically, every cartoon character ever gets molded and fused together into this gross, grotesque body horror static, which would feed on everything and everyone. If that is not a pretty obvious metaphor about capitalism.
Yeah, it's like Warner Brothers basically had a post-nut clarity moment of, oh, we're corrupting our childhoods.
No. Clearly not. It's whomever made this clearly had that revelation and epiphany. Warner Bros. Clearly had nothing. Which is the reason why this might not actually become a series at all.
Yes, I know, but I just thought it'd be funny to say at least. Just imagine this momentary clarity, like, oh, we're corrupting everyone's childhood.
Oh yes, the company that puts big chungus in their gacha mobile game clearly have an epiphany about their own dastardly nature.
But yeah, I'm gonna say the concept is, is that the main character would be a animated children's program character that's all about hugging, learning, sharing. They have best friends to support each other. Then
our world dies.
Yes, and she loses her best friend Bun Bun to a black mass of goop and static that basically is absorbing and devouring everything it finds.
It's Disney. No, it's Warner Bros. Basically. No, let's be fair, it's every corporation ever.
Yeah, it pretty much is every corporation ever. And it doesn't just devour said characters that you hold dear, like Fred Flintstone and
Poor Fred.
and George Jetson and Dexter
Finn and Jake.
DD. Yeah, Finn and Jake.
They come back as horrible zombies.
Yeah, it's like they're husks of themselves and being corrupted by this glitchy mass that's basically leaking out of every orifice. And even when the characters are basically say, "We gotta stay quiet," sort of thing, you hear this static, voice going, "Quiet," in a similar style to Adventure Time.
The dehumanizing greed of corporations ruins artistic integrity, and indeed the people who make the art.
But it's not just that makes it the most interesting and most tantalizing aspect about Pibby. It's basically the fact that you take characters like, well, OCs, I would say, like Pibby, and two other characters that from original animated worlds that do not exist in the Warner Brothers library, and you basically get introduced...
Give a chainsaw to this bunny!
Yes. And basically you have Pibby, who is this, like I said before, is a children's character that has no concept of dark themes or evil and all that. Then you have the superhero sidekick, who has always been in the shadow of a superhero who is totally not Captain Planet, OC Do Not Steal.
Maybe Captain America.
Who gets...
The generic superhero sidekick,
Yes.
essentially.
And then you
And
also
then you have
have...
Furry Villainous.
Yes.
From a Saturday morning cartoon, I would assume.
Yes, pretty much. And all three of these characters are basically brought together by this common threat of the black mass of glitches and goop. And they basically have to find a way to figure out what it is, why is it doing what it's doing, and to find a way to stop it and fix everything. And I would totally want to see that. Just saying.
Yes. I once again, I don't think this would work as a multiple season series, given
No.
the premise. But it would definitely work as either an animated feature or a mini-series. Which I would definitely watch.
I would
Yes.
agree. I would definitely agree with that.
Something about the length of Over the Garden Wall. Something like that would definitely be on my radar. I hope it gets made.
Me too. Anyway, I think we said enough about that. So, anything you have been playing
Yes.
or watching? What else have we got?
I would like to bring to everybody's attention a short animated film about 13 minutes in length, which has been realized by a traditional animator, Baru. That's the name she goes by on Twitter. This short is titled Dredge.
Dredge.
It is a short horror film. Now, it doesn't have much in terms of a budget, indeed, and the animation is extremely limited. It's basically a little bit more of an animatic, very rough animation onto various preset backgrounds. Again, pencil on paper, not using digital programs.
Yeah.
So I would appreciate it for what it is in that sense. While the animation is very limited, sometimes I would say to the detriment of the scenes, I still like it for the kind of atmosphere it conveys. There is a proper sense of its own cinematography and a scenic composition. It is unnerving and claustrophobic. It is alienating and also intriguing. If I were to interpret it, I would believe it's about living in a society, or more specifically, it's about surviving in a society in which you're either a slave to the system that literally fishes out bodies from a muddy river, or you become one of the bodies in the river. There is a lot of potential subtext in that particular presentation, and I think it's definitely worth your time. I'm going to leave the link for where you can find this film on the doobly-doo.
Yeah.
Just so, yes, because I don't remember exactly what was the site where I have gotten it. But it's good. I would recommend it. It's different, it's interesting, it is flawed, but the flaws make it human. This is art at its most unpolished, yet visceral. And I can certainly appreciate it for that.
Right. Okay.
So that's it. It's titled, once again, it's titled Dredge.
I'll keep that in mind then.
Yes.
I mean, so far the one animated series I've been looking at was basically season 2 of Centaurworld.
Yes, I've seen it. I do not want to say that the magic is gone from season 1, but it was never really the most structured narrative to be had. In fact, I would argue that the final episode is basically a whole new story that was tacked on at the end of the show because they did not really have a story to explore.
Yeah, I mean, the final episode was like 1 hour and 30 minutes. That's like a movie.
And it tells basically a story that was never told before, and it was resolved by the real main characters, which are not the ones you've been following thus far.
Yeah, I think that's one of my biggest gripes about that, honestly.
Yes.
That basically, the one character, the main characters we've been following, and none of them actually, do the final thing.
They felt like side characters in their own show because the story was never really about them and, in fact, was not resolved by them. The main protagonist, the alleged protagonist, Horse, was used as a means to convey vital information to the audience, and that's about it. It's not very satisfying as far as resolutions go, but it is still a fun show overall. It is very funny and the characters are likable. The animation is, as always, pretty good and varied. Did you know that they had 2 animation studios working on this series? One did the Centaurworld portions, the other one did the Minotaur World portions, which would explain why they are so stylistically different. It was very much on purpose.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So, as far as coordinated efforts between 2 different animation studios go, this is one of the most solid projects of that particular kind. And there aren't many that can claim that. So, on that note, I'd say that Centaurworld is a great accomplishment as far as the art of animation is concerned. But it's not a very well-told story, and it was never really the strongest suit.
Nah. I mean, there was obviously ideas, but they just were not fully realized and and the ending was not exactly the most satisfying, even though I still left feeling entertained and like it was good.
Yes.
And, you know...
It was missing something.
It basically felt like it should have had a few more rethoughts about how to make the main character actually be the one to resolve the situation.
But the problem is that it was never really her story or anyone else's story besides those 3 characters that are barely in the show. This was always their story, and it's not satisfying from an audience standpoint to see all of that just revealed in the very last episode. It's a series that needed to be, what's a diplomatic way of putting it? Reverse engineered, if you will. It seems very selfish of me to say, but I truly think it would have been better if it was just 1 season long. If they would have fought a beginning, middle, and end for 1 season instead of stretching it for 2 seasons only to have us experience that tucked-on ending that tells a whole new story that very much undermines everything that happened before. But at the very, very least, Centaurworld does get to have a proper conclusion, which is so much more than we can say about Netflix Bebop.
Oh, God.
Oh, that tragedy. What an absolute tragedy that was.
I remember hearing from many popular female VTubers, many popular men on YouTube, that they were happy and glad that Netflix's Cowboy Bebop got cancelled after the 1st season.
That seems very petulant, if you ask me.
Yeah, I know, right?
By the way, I sensed that this would be an utter tragedy, so I just skipped it entirely. I had absolutely no interest in watching this ever since it was first announced. So to see the reactions to it was honestly a much more entertaining show for me.
Yeah, I must admit, even I was like not really bothered about it because I have a personal bias against live action versions of animated
They are inferior.
series, because you can only do so much with live action actors, but you can do so much more with animation. And when you've seen it animated, it feels like you're downgrading because you cannot do the same things you do with animation.
I'll be honest with you, the show that has the better probability to work as a live action would be Gundam. Gundam, I find, is very stale, very uninteresting. So it would be perfect for live action. That's my backhanded insult.
I mean, they technically have a live action remake in the form of a crappy video game.
Right, so that's going to be fun for nobody. Anyway, so I would like to, before we end this podcast, because I believe we had enough topics for today.
Yeah, so what do you want
I would like to end this on a relatively high note.
Yeah.
To make you feel better with yourself and the disgusting, gross world you live in. Because it is so easy to get discouraged, to drown yourself in nihilistic alcohol binge drinking because of all the bad news you receive every single day by all the outlets and grifters who boost the bad news for profit, and you are inundated with nothing but bad news. So much so that you did not even notice all the good things that happened this year alone, because they were so drowned out by all the bad things.
Yeah, agreed. By the way, trivia about human beings. Humans basically have evolved to basically concentrate on negativity and negative news and bad news, because a lot of scientists believe that it's basically an evolution of humans looking out for danger from caveman times, and that has evolved to basically making basically only concentrating on whatever's negative that threatens you.
That's very cool, Devar, but I was trying to get to a point here.
Don't worry, I just wanted to say, so what was the point you were going to say?
The point is, somebody posted an article on boredpanda.com, which is titled, "I'm honestly fed up with all the bad news, so I illustrated 40 of the best ones from 2021. There is a text blurb that pretty much tells you what I already told you about the world we live in. And then we get to several very cute illustrations that, in a very succinct manner, tell you what are the very good news that you inevitably missed out this year due to everything else that happened.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you a few examples off the cuff, such as Mexico just banned animal testing for cosmetics. It's the first country in North America to outlaw the practice.
Yes.
Portugal have been given a massive win in work-related mental health, as a new law says it's illegal for your boss to phone, email, or text you after work hours. Yes!
Oh yes, I've definitely heard about that one.
Oh, remember how ruined the Great Barrier Reef used to be?
Yeah.
It was a big deal some years ago. Well, I have good news on that front too. The Great Barrier Reef bursts with new life as millions, I repeat, millions of coral babies are born. A very happy coral reef news after 3 bleaching events in past years.
Good. That's wonderful to hear.
A Canadian company aims to plant 1 billion trees using drones that can shoot seed pods into the ground in remote areas that have suffered from deforestation. Ah, great news! Giant pandas are no longer an endangered species!
Nice!
Thanks to conservation efforts, their numbers are finally rebounding after years of decline.
Oh, that makes me so happy to hear.
Big news for the big cats. In a major move, South Africa will finally ban the breeding of lions in captivity for trophy hunting or for tourists to pet.
I will say piss off to the trophy hunters.
Yes. Always. In an unlikely partnership, every time a new child arrives in Wales, 2 trees are planted, 1 at home and 1 in Uganda. So far, 15 million trees have been planted.
I just nod to that.
That's very good. Ah! And lastly, but certainly not leastly, major study finds that the ozone layer is healing! And it's on pace for a full recovery by 2050. A much-needed win. Never forget that as bad as things get, and they will continue to get worse in some areas, there are still people fighting the good fight, and people who legitimately care for our planet and cannot afford to go to Mars with all the billionaires. Exactly. So, we got one planet, and we need to save it. And this is important to remember.
And this is why I basically brought up earlier about the whole concept of human beings and their minds basically unable to tear themselves away from negative news that they hear, because then they miss out on all the positive news and all the good things that are actually going on.
Indeed. It's important to have the strength to detach yourself for a moment from all the awfulness and seek out that sweet, sweet serotonin release in your brain.
Yes.
This is an article that tells you about the good things that happened this year with cute little illustrations to go with them. I shall put this link in the description so that you too can feel better about the world, which is something that we definitely need every once in a while, especially under the season of stress. Right then.
So I think with that, I think we're done.
As you might recall, I promised I was going to sing to you the Italian version of the Digimon Adventure theme song.
You promised that?
Oh yes! Digimon, 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 Digimon. Da 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 da. This is the instrumental part, by the way, which I cannot reproduce, obviously.
Yes.
Let's get to the lyrics already. Digimon, vola nel tuo mondo, isola virtuale, Black Gear perderà. Siamo tutti uniti, tutti con i Digimon. Time at Sora, Itzy, Lily and Joe. Noi siamo amici, siamo noi catapultati al Digi-World. Digimon, ma con l'amicizia tra di noi. Ragazzi veri e Digimon, libereremo il Digi-World. Digimon! Digimon!
Yeah, I remember
you.
that. I definitely remember that.
Thank you very much. Okay, and on that, and on the highest note possible, I shall bid you a good night. Thanks for watching and or listening to our MADPlay podcast. I forgot to say it's the MADPlay podcast. Dang it!
just put it in post, as Icy Pal would say.
Don't do this to me. This has been Madhog, the master of the pinball machine.
And I've been Devar, pinball wizard Arkvaron.
Together we are the Digi-Destined. Okay, let's go on an adventure, Devar.
A pinball Digimon adventure, sure.
I would kill for a Digimon-themed pinball machine. Hey, do you have any family member you want to see dead?
Good night, everybody. Take care.